Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so this is a very sad weekend as Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a member of the Supreme Court, and she was kind of a revolutionary feminist. She had sort of what was kind of a quintessential female experience of her time, which is that she was asked when she was a law student how she felt about taking a spot away from a man. She was told when she got her first law jobs that it was okay for her to be underpaid because her husband made more money. She was also a Jewish woman, so there were lots of doors slammed in her face for that, and still she kind of took this attitude. She was also fired when she first got pregnant, and this is something that will be relevant as we discuss motherhood later in an Ask. But yeah, she spent her career fighting for equality. She strategically chose to also represent male plaintiffs so that no one could accuse her of making feminism, just about women, that it was about equivalency, that men also deserve to be caretakers for their family and receive family leave. She really strongly advocated for a lot of stuff that we would maybe consider just normal human rights, but certainly bodily autonomy for women. Her loss is an incredible loss, but I do think that, above everything, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in a lot of ways an optimist. She really believed that if we worked within the system, we could change it and improve it. And I want to believe that she's right. I don't know that I really believe it because the Supreme Court is becoming increasingly kind of a joke and certainly a political tool, which is really unfortunate because I know that's not what kind of person she was. And yeah, but it's our turn now to try to change something, to use our talents for good. So yeah, I know this is predominantly an American issue, but I am, an American, so it's just gonna have to come up. And it's sad to lose her. Just as a person and her history and everything that she did that was just so incredible, and also as a very, very important voice who really advocated for more than we're seeming to get sometimes, but it's time to get to work, right? The S.P.E.L.L. book this month was The Joy Luck Club, is The Joy Luck Club. I have posted that discussion, so that is available to you. It was really personal for me, so a lot of what I chatted about was kind of my experience, my family, my mother and her mother. Not that there's ever really a structure to these discussions, but you're welcome to share your experience. I think this is a book that ends up being quite personal, especially for people who, like me, have an immigrant mother and have grown up in the United States and kind of dealing with the sort of just the conflict of identity. Who are we? This kind of question of, who are we? Who are our mothers? What have they given us? What have we lost? I think one of my favorite lines actually is, I think about our two faces. I think about my intentions. Which one is American? Which one is Chinese? Which one is better? If you show one, you must always sacrifice the other. It's like what happened when I went back to China last year after I had not been there for almost 40 years. I had taken off my fancy jewelry. I didn't wear loud colors. I spoke their language. I used their money. But still, they knew. They knew my face was not 100% Chinese. They still charged me high foreign prices. So now I think, what did I lose? What did I get back in return? I will ask my daughter what she thinks. Ugh. I mean, it means more when you've been throughout the book and seen sort of the contentious relationship that particular mother and daughter have, but yeah. Oh, and I also have a glass of spiced apple cider, the Trader Joe's brand. I'm just going to go ahead and pretend that it's fall since that seems preferable to fires and earthquakes. For the record, I usually drink this warm. I make it around Christmas for my family, and sometimes I spike it with a little bit of wine, usually red wine. And then I also put cinnamon sticks in it, and what else do I put in it? And I can't remember what else I do with it, but anyway, yeah, the cinnamon sticks are really the key part. All right, so we've talked about motherhood before and sort of the question of, do I want children? But I think we talked about it from sort of an older perspective, from someone who was already in a serious relationship and someone who was married and kind of suddenly dealing with baby fever. So we were talking about someone who was maybe in their mid or late 20s, and now we have someone who is in their early 20s. So Hi, Olivie. I was Zooming with some of my friends the other day, and someone brought up the topic of having kids, and pretty much all of my friends were like, I'm not going to have kids, or I'll adopt. And I remember thinking that out of the 7 of us, surely someone will end up having kids. So I was wondering if you think this is a phase younger women go through, we're in college, by the way, or if we're just freaked out by the concept of childbirth. I'm kind of ambiguous myself. When I was younger, I always thought I'd end up having kids, but that's probably because of cultural influences, both American and South Asian. And even now, I've always had the thought that I'll someday probably do the right thing, and with capital letters, marry and have kids. But I found it interesting that a lot of my friends were outright rejecting it, since most of them come from the same background as me. Did you ever have similar thoughts, or do you think it's just an age thing, or do you think that by the time we're 20, we've made up our minds? So I think the age thing is pretty important. I think that, when I was talking about the Commoner's Guide and that sort of whole universe and how I was dealing with the women and their decisions about motherhood, I felt that it was really important to show someone who definitely did not want children. They knew it and they didn't change their mind, because that is definitely a thing. It is, I think, perfectly fine and not at all unmaternal or irresponsible to not want children and that's just how it is. I think that what you call doing the right thing is doing the social construct thing, which is that women will get married and have children, even at a loss to their own ambitions and dreams, which, even though it's better now than it has been, that's still definitely a thing. Emotional labor really falls primarily to the mother. And there's still sort of the idea, it's still maternity leave and not family leave in a lot of places. It's still, women are still passed over for promotions. They still get paid less because there's this presumption that if they get pregnant and have children, then they are less reliable. There's really, especially the presumption that women are going to always put their children first, whereas men aren't. So if it comes down to a situation where it's like you want an employee who's going to be there like grinding through the night or whatever, you want a man because a woman is going to have to go home to her children. But what is that expectation? It's a little bit crazy, but it is the time that we live in. That is the presumption, especially if the employer is male, that most people do make. So I think that it's fair to make the decision, especially if you're in academia or in a male-dominated field, to say, I don't want to sacrifice my ambitions for anything. And I think that it's not only fair, I think it can often be the right thing to do. I think that a lot of times, parenthood is an unselfish decision. You have to decide, male or female, that you are going to put this thing that you brought into the world first. So what I'm saying is what I was talking about previously, I'm not saying that women shouldn't put their children first. I'm saying that men should not be allowed to not put their children first. Like that this should be sort of an equal presumption that a parent is of course going to put their children's needs ahead of their job, so then that's a difficult thing to ask of anyone, especially if what they love in life is their work, or what gives meaning to their life is their work. And it's also this sort of difficult thing where women can really only conceive for a certain amount of time, and it can take a long time to be successful. One of the things that's so interesting and rare about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that she didn't really hit her career stride until she was 37. And for a lot of women, that's too late. There's not a great chance that they're going to be offered opportunities at that age. In a lot of ways, Ruth Bader Ginsburg did get lucky. And I think she says that herself. She had a very supportive spouse. And same with Elizabeth Warren, who the same thing happened to her where she was a teacher and she got laid off because she was pregnant. And this is why, I'm totally going off on a tangent here, but this is why it's so important to have these women in positions of power in places where decisions are made, because they represent this voice that maybe we can change this for our daughters, that maybe for us, it is pretty much accepted that a man is a preferential choice for many employers. That there is going to be the presumption that women who have children, children are going to hold us back in some way. And I don't think it's wrong to identify that because of what I was saying, that being someone's parent, being responsible for their life, means that you have to put them first to some degree. You have to care for them because you brought them into this very shitty world. there's also the ethical concern of like, what is going to be here for them? I think that it's not unreasonable for not only your age, but your generation to ask, is it the morally responsible choice to bring something into this world when I can't promise that there's going to be resources, or that they're going to live in a world where women have bodily autonomy? I don't know. And the fact that I don't know that, I don't know it for myself, is hard to determine for my child. But I think the hope is that, those of us who do have children are going to hopefully keep working to keep being, this is the pride we have in RBG and in Liz Warren and in Hillary Clinton and these women who really, they are mothers and they have made their career about supporting other mothers. So that was just another thing. And the conversation about autonomy is a whole thing too. The Emily Ratajkowski essay that came out earlier this week about who owns her body was a very, very interesting question. And I think that it's fair, it's right that you guys should be sort of grappling with this idea at this age, because you're at sort of the peak of your ambition. You're in college. Your plan is not to shift your dreams aside, which is not to belittle the dream of being a wife or a mother. It's not to say that that is a less worthy pursuit. It's just to say that while you're in college, while you're in your early 20s, that's probably not what you're looking for. I think you're already under the pressure to succeed, especially, by the time you're 30. I think this is why that late 20s age becomes sort of a really questionable time, because you kind of realize that this is your last chance to be on the Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever. You see the change on the horizon, this like turning point in your life where you're supposed to have done something. And I think that's why at that age, a lot of people are like, should I be thinking about having children? Do I want children? Do I suddenly really badly want children? And I think partly it's social programming, partly it's hormones, partly it's just this idea of like, what do I matter in the scheme of things? The idea of your 20s is that you figure out who you are. In your very early 20s, you don't know the answer to that question. So that means that your answer to the question, do I want children, may or may not change. I first told my mother when I was in high school, I want to say I was 16 or 17, and I said, would you be angry if I never had children? And she's like, of course I wouldn't be angry. I didn't bring you into this world so that you would have more children. I brought you into this world so that you would do things that you wanted and that you would have your dreams and your hopes and you would pursue those things. I think she secretly always thought I would change my mind. Like it wasn't, I was 16. What did I know? She was just kind of like, I will love you regardless. So I do think it's fair to think to yourself, this isn't something I want because I want so many other things. And then to have that change as you do discover more of yourself and you become more comfortable with the idea of yourself. I think that definitely that comfort with yourself, the idea that this is who I am and I accept it, and maybe it wouldn't be the most horrifying thing in the world if I recognize that maybe I do have some maternal needs. Maybe I do have a tender sort of love that I want to give someone. And maybe that doesn't have to compromise my ambitions. I think that is something that often happens later in life. But I also think it does make a lot of sense for people your age to decide this isn't something I want. Some of them will change their minds. Some of them won't. You may change your mind. For me, it had a lot to do with my partner and who he was. I didn't want children at all until I had been with him for a substantial amount of time. So even though he kind of always thought that we would, kind of what you were saying, that he always thought like, well, I'll have kids because that's what's expected of me, I firmly was like, I don't want them, until I realized, okay, well, maybe I sort of thought of it in the sense of like meeting my future child with him as the father. I was like, who would that kid be? And that would be interesting to me. So yeah, but that's something for me. If I were single right now, I would not have any interest in being a mother. That's really not the goal. Yeah, it's more like I can see the beauty of just meeting whoever that person would be. But yeah, when I was in college, I was in a sorority, which is very good, like experimenting, testing pool, and I would say it was probably a third definitely like wanted children, wanted to be mothers. That was their plan. They were like all about it. Another third were like, whatever, maybe I will. This is so far in the future, I'm not thinking about it. And another third were like, never, I hate kids. And I was in that last third. So yeah, yeah, it's very common at your age to ask these questions and have these conversations, and super, super common to change your mind later in life, because your life will look different. I think I've heard somewhere your 20s are about figuring out who you are, and then your 30s are about doing it on purpose or something. Like, I think that trajectory of figuring out what you really love in the world will provide you a little bit more clarity. And I don't think that you even really need to have that answer in your 20s. I think it's something that you can definitely answer for yourself. Life is long. There's plenty of, fertility methods that could allow you to get pregnant later in life. This is not something you need to decide now. Nor do I really think you should decide it now. I think you can kind of open yourself to the idea of you might feel differently. But definitely kind of strike it from your mind as being like a thing that it's doing the right thing, and that other people who aren't talking about it are doing the wrong thing. I get what you mean about that being a reflex, especially a cultural reflex, but I think that you will probably, once you remove that from your mind, feel differently about the concept of motherhood. You might feel more positively or more negatively, I don't know, but yeah, you don't have to decide right now. Olivie, how does one write two characters that are falling in love if they're characters that are usually way too stupid and oblivious to notice anything, even if it smacked them upside the head? I mean, most characters are kind of like that sometimes, but these characters are especially stupid and unaware. Well, you bear in mind you're writing for an audience who maybe doesn't want to be like super annoyed. So there's probably a definite balance here. I actually think that this question and the next question have very similar answers, where you might want to, this might be something where it's kind of trial and error, and you just have to see what your critique partners say, or if this is a fanfic, what your audience says. If your audience is growing very impatient, they'll probably tell you. That is the fun and terrible thing about fanfiction. So you can't get away with doing something unpopular for long, because people will tell you that they hate it, or they'll just go away. And that's kind of how you realize, oh, I'm losing people. And it can suck, because once you've lost someone, they're not coming back. But, try not to think of yourself as any one work. Think of yourself as your body of work. I say this all the time. But yeah, you can try this and see what happens. But I think that if you feel that something's taking too long, you are the author. You can engineer something to happen. This happens all the time in How to Win Friends and Influence People, is that something kind of has to prompt them to accidentally say something to each other. A lot of times that's like intoxication, that's someone letting something slip, some other character overhearing something. You do have, this is your world. They can be as stupid as you want to make them, but it's still you maneuvering them. You are the puppet master here, so their destiny is in your hands. And if they're really stupid, even stupid people fall in love somehow, so you might have to be the one who figures out how you do that. I think you just want to, yeah, sure, you want to be consistent with your characterization. That's fine, but don't take all day. And hi, Olivie, hope it's okay if I ask you a writing question. Was just wondering how one can balance writing deep introspection and more poetic writing without losing a character's voice, especially with a character who's not one that usually partakes in introspection nor thinks poetically. This is a very specific question, so all I can tell you is that the rule of thumb is always consistency. Same with the last question, which is, you can decide how you expose their voice. So you're the one that's deciding if this is a third person point of view or first person close, where they're talking and they're giving their interior narration. And if it doesn't match, then that's, you have to be consistent with your characterization of them. They can only speak, even in their heads, the way that you have designed them to speak. The only way that you could potentially balance this is if you're doing an omniscient point of view, so that the narrator is not one of the characters and the narrator can give information to the audience that the character themselves is not actually thinking. I answered on Tumblr that you can also experiment with this, same with the previous ask. A lot of this is trial and error. It's kind of adapting experience. Everything, when it comes down to balance, especially balancing the narrative and the characterization, you only learn to balance by tipping too far one way and tipping back, you know? So if you make mistakes, if you write something that doesn't work, that's fine. You can fix it. You can write something different next time. You figure out where that line is. But it's not something that I can tell you, especially not knowing exactly what the narration is and any of that. Anyway, that was a very quick, very condensed answer because Mr. Blake is home and I have to go. But yeah, so just remember to be consistent. Don't break with your characterization. You're very young and life is long. Hopefully this answers all of your questions for at least the next week. Also, the answer you were looking for is yes is coming out on Tuesday. I have been posting some excerpts, which I hope you have been enjoying. We'll see. You know I hate promo, but very excited for this book to be here and for me to show you, etc. Anyway, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.